VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on the VCY America Network. Folks, there is so much that is going on, and things are moving so rapidly. We do have a number of issues to bring to your attention today. We're going to focus a lot on Benghazi and why it matters for the program, but stay with us throughout the duration. I'll have a number of brief news clips here at the end of today's program to bring you up to speed, but just want to make mention of a couple things here as we get started. Number one, today indeed is the March for Life that is going on through Washington, D.C. Many people participating in that, standing up for life. And what's interesting is that most of the stories coming forth from the media are just calling it a march, and for some reason leave off the other words, March for Life. And just kind of an interesting note. One other thing that broke late this morning, and this is from the Washington Post, that in an embarrassing setback for President Obama, a federal appeals court panel ruled today that he violated the Constitution in making recess appointments last year. It's a decision that could effectively cut a president's ability to bypass the Senate to fill administrative vacancies. It was a three-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit saying that Mr. Obama did not have the power to make three recess appointments last year to the National Labor Relations Board because the Senate was officially in session and not in recess. So if this decision stands, the Post says it could invalidate hundreds of board decisions. The court said that the president could only fill vacancies with the recess appointment procedure if the openings arise when the Senate is in official recess, which it defined as the break between sessions of Congress. Well, the White House didn't have any comment on that, but it's expected to appeal that decision. But, folks, this is a huge issue that we certainly were covering at that time, but it's been making its way through the court system at this time as well. Well, this week has been an interesting week as a delayed hearing took place before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee regarding the killing of a U.S. ambassador and staff in Libya, the attack that we saw there. Here to talk about this issue of Benghazi and why it matters is Ben Barrack, who is a investigative radio host and blogger. He broadcasts in Central Texas. He's the author of the book Unsung Davids, 10 Men Who Battled Goliath Without Glory. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Jim. Nice to be with you.
I think as we talk about Benghazi, some of the details perhaps are a little foggy in some people's minds. So could you just kind of give us a very brief overview to refresh our minds as to what transpired in Benghazi?
Yeah. Basically, on September 11th, the 11th anniversary of 9/11, in Benghazi, we had what was at the time billed a consulate, and also not far away was a CIA annex. And on the anniversary of 9/11, there were protests taking place in Egypt where the protesters there laid siege to our embassy in Cairo and changed our flag with an Al-Qaeda flag. And there were other attacks across the Middle East on embassies and such. But this was different in Benghazi in that there was no protest. There was an assault, a fundamentalist Islamic assault on this compound, and RPGs were used, and the ambassador, Christopher Stevens, was killed along with the IT manager, Sean Smith, and later on in the night, actually it was basically right before dawn, two former Navy SEALs who are currently working at the CIA annex lost their lives fighting off the attacks after they had saved several people from that special mission compound about a mile away.
Now, we know that there is a whole lot of irregularities that have come about through this, different varying remarks that have come forth, but one of the things that's been a question is the security request that had come. This embassy had given security requests for a beefing up of security. What do we know about that and why it was denied?
That is the never-ending question. There were not only was security denied, but security was withdrawn. You had a couple of guys with the security detail testify about a month after 9/11 in front of the House Oversight Committee, along with a couple of the State Department bureaucrats. that were culpable in the policies that led to this. One of them, Charlene Lamb, was actually one of the employees who was identified by the County Accountability Review Board report, which just came out last month, and found no one accountable. Go figure. But all that to say, the security was withheld and withdrawn, and Christopher Stevens went to this compound days before 9/11, and that's also another mystery. What the heck was he doing there, and why was there no security detail? So we're still trying to hammer all that out.
Yeah, is it plausible to believe that the Secretary of State had no knowledge that they were requesting more security?
That's what they would like you to believe, because when the hand's caught in the cookie jar, the best defense is to deny it's in there. Deny there's cookies anywhere, and that's what these folks always do. Whenever they're caught, they would rather be perceived as naive, stupid, or ignorant than to come down as having known anything. And it's not believable. In much the same way that it was not believable that Eric Holder didn't know anything about gun running for 2 years in the Fast and Furious scandal. So I personally don't believe it. And if she didn't know, then she should have lost her job because of sheer incompetence.
Well, and we'll get to a comment made by Senator Paul in regard to that matter, but another discrepancy has to do with what precipitated, what caused this uprising, what caused the attack to take place. And we heard all kinds of different things, but one of the liners that we kept hearing through the Sunday talk shows was the fact that it was this obscure YouTube video that precipitated the attacks and caused the attacks to take place. What do we know about this situation?
I've got my own take on that, Jim. I look at what happened in Egypt. The entire Muslim world was exploiting this anti-Muhammad video. There's two things here. The entire Muslim world was exploiting this anti-Muhammad video for one sole purpose. It was to squelch speech protections, both internationally in Egypt and over here, ultimately in the United States. There is the Middle East and the Arab world does not want criticism of Islam and Muhammad. It's about control, and the movement over there was to exploit the video to intimidate countries into enacting laws that would make it a crime to criticize Islam or the Prophet. Now, their Prophet. Now, the thing that always disturbed me about this is that here you have Susan Rice 5 days after 9/11, after the attack in Benghazi, on 5 Sunday talk shows, telling everybody on each show that this Libyan attack, Benghazi attack, arose spontaneously from a protest in response to the video. Now, that narrative put this administration on the same side in some respects as the Arab world. And then you've got to ask yourself, was this administration using this crisis, the deaths of 4 Americans, I use the term crisis because it's their formula, it's using this crisis in Benghazi to chill freedom of speech rights, to chill criticism of Islam, because that's ultimately what that was doing. I mean, the notion that the attack happened in response to the video and that this administration would push that narrative means that they necessarily were siding with the Arab world when it came to criticism of Islam. Now, that's a problem. We know that this administration is targeting our Second Amendment rights. All you have to do is look at Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
Why would it be such a stretch to think that they would target our First Amendment rights? And then it all unraveled for them, and it became more than obvious that the facts on the ground at the time, and certainly within 24 hours, were that the video had nothing to do with it. Yet Barack Obama himself allowed that narrative to continue and pushed it about 2 weeks after 9/11.
I'd like, Ben, for us to listen to a brief portion of questions that were brought up in that Senate committee hearing by Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, where it became very evident he was getting under the skin of the Secretary of State. Let's listen to the clip, and then we'll have you comment on it.
Okay.
Madam Secretary, do you disagree with me that a simple phone call to those evacuees to determine what happened wouldn't have ascertained immediately that there was no protest? I mean, that was a piece of information that could have been easily obtained.
Well, but Senator,
within hours, if not days.
Senator, when you're in these positions, the last thing you want to do is interfere with any other process going
I
on.
realize that's a good excuse.
Number two, no, it's the fact. Number two, I would recommend highly you read both what the ARB said about it and the classified ARB, because even today there are questions being raised. Now, we have no doubt they were terrorists, they were militants, they attacked us, they killed our people. But what was going on and why they were doing what they were doing?
No. Again, we were misled that there was supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact. And the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again, Senator. Now, honestly, I will do my best to answer your questions about this, but the fact is that people were trying in real time to get to the best information. The IC has a process, I understand, going with the other committees to explain how these talking points came out. But, to be clear, it is, from my perspective, less important today, looking backwards, as to why these militants decided they did it, than to find them and bring them to justice. And then maybe we'll figure out what was going on in the meantime. Okay,
here she says, what difference does it make? Let me ask you, Ben, what does it make a difference?
Absolutely. Absolutely it makes a difference. And what I believe you're hearing there is somebody that got busted. I believe that they did not, they obviously believed that they could successfully push the narrative that it was the video. And there were things that took place that were out of their control that prevented that narrative from taking hold. And what you're hearing there is a very defensive Secretary of State that knows that she was that the administration was busted, and that's she nothing to see her move along is basically what you were hearing there. This Secretary of State says that she accepts responsibility. Yet she did not lose her job. When you accept responsibility, a natural outgrowth of that is accountability. When you are accountable, you pay a price for inaction, incompetence, poor judgment, failure of leadership. You pay a price for those things. So, it's far too common to see these folks have responsibility without accountability. And when you don't have the accountability, more of this stuff is going to happen.
Ben Barrack is our guest here today on Crosstalk. We're going to take another break. And when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion here. Benghazi, why it matters. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, Creation Seminar speaker at the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, is it constitutionally permissible to teach creation in the public schools?
Chris, if you listen to the evolution advocacy groups, they'll tell you that the Supreme Court has ruled against it. But this is not true. The Constitution was framed primarily by believers in creation. The Declaration of Independence mentions creation concepts several times. A recent law was passed in Congress that encouraged schools to help students understand the full range of views that exist, particularly biological evolution. There is no justification for censoring information and brainwashing students in one view. Chris, it's a shame that evolutionists have usurped the proper role of public education over this issue. They basically are teaching the religion of naturalistic evolution in the name of science. How much better to go back to Genesis and get it right.
This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for going back to Genesis.
You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network. Ben Barrack is our guest here today. He's an investigative radio host. He's a blogger. He broadcasts in Central Texas to the Fort Hood area. He's the author of the book Unsung Davids, 10 Men Who Battled Goliath Without Glory. Ben, those who want to get a copy of your book, how can they do it?
Oh, the usual way. Barnes & Noble is carrying it. You can also go to Amazon.com and pick it up.
We were hearing that clip from Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. It was very evident he got under the skin of the Secretary of State there. But, I also thought this matters because of the fact that for so long the American people were given a line by this administration that just didn't measure up. And if we cannot, when evidence is there that they knew differently, so that really begs the question, what else did they know that the public does not know?
Yeah, and I think, a little bit later or during the same hearing, you saw a little bit of that with the Rand Paul testimony when he asked Hillary a very specific question, and I thought she may have committed perjury in response to it because it smacked of unbelievability.
Yeah, let's begin with a clip from Rand Paul as he started his questioning with her, and we'll delve into some of the other areas he brought up. Let's listen to it.
Okay.
Thank you for appearing, Secretary Clinton, and I'm glad to see your health is improving. One of the things that disappointed me most about the original 9/11 was no one was fired. We spent trillions of dollars, but there were a lot of human errors. These are judgment errors, and the people who make judgment errors need to be replaced, fired, and no longer in a position of making these judgment calls. So we have a review board. The review board finds 64 different things that we could change. A lot of them are common sense and should be done, but the question is, it's a failure of leadership that they weren't done in advance, and 4 lives were cost because of this. I'm glad that you're accepting responsibility. I think that ultimately with your leaving, you accept the culpability for the worst tragedy since 9/11, and I really mean that. Had I been president at the time and I found that you did not read the cables from Benghazi, you did not read the cables from Ambassador Stevens, I would have relieved you of your post. I think it's inexcusable. The thing is that, we can understand that you're not reading every cable. I can understand that maybe you're not aware of the cable from the ambassador in Vienna that asked for $100,000 for an electrical charging station. I can understand that maybe you're not aware that your department spent $100,000 on 3 comedians who went to India on a promotional tour called Make Chi Not War. But I think you might be able to understand and might be aware of the $80 million spent on a consulate in Mashar al-Sharif that will never be built. I think it's inexcusable that you did not know about this and that you did not read these cables. I would think by anybody's estimation, Libya has to have been one of the hottest of hot spots around the world. Not to know of the request for securities really, I think, cost these people their lives. Their lives could have been saved had someone been more available, had someone been aware of these things, more on top of the job. And the thing is I don't suspect you of bad motives. The review board said, well, these people weren't willfully negligent. I don't think you were willfully. I don't suspect your motives of wanting to serve your country, but it was a failure of leadership not to be involved. It was a failure of leadership not to know these things. And so I think it is good that you're accepting responsibility because no one else is. And there is a certain amount of culpability to the worst tragedy since 9/11, and I'm glad you're accepting this.
Some interesting opening there where Senator Paul said he would have fired her.
Yeah, that caught my attention at the time, as I'm sure it did many others. By the way, I thought Rand Paul of both hearings was far and away the best congressman and or senator to confront Hillary. But the thing is here is another aspect to this, another reference to Fast and Furious. Fast and Furious was something that Eric Holder, very similarly to what Hillary was maintaining, said he didn't get the memos. He didn't get the briefs. He didn't get the documents. This is very similar in that regard, and in both cases, it led to, it led to murders.
Well, and coupled with that, there are allegations as to whether the Obama administration was smuggling guns to jihadist rebels in a possible international Fast and Furious that the White House has tried to cover up. This line of questioning has also been coming from Senator Paul.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence for this, such a tie?
From what I understand, there is just a lot of chatter from allegedly originating from some of the folks that are close to it that have just had enough and are not they're just fed up with this administration in some regards. And then also there have been news reports about that. And I don't know if you have the other part of that clip, but what Rand Paul asked Hillary was, and this is very interesting, and a lot of times I look at this from a analytical standpoint, from the human nature. And one of the things that he said, he asked her specifically, did the CIA annex, was it involved in funneling or trafficking weapons to Turkey? And her response was, Turkey? Almost like that it was a ridiculous question, and how could he ask something so ridiculous to almost diminish Rand Paul for having asked it. This is what people who have something to hide do. She didn't answer a yes or no question, yes or no. She answered the question by repeating part of the word in the question, and then when pressed, she said she didn't know. Now, I don't know about you, Jim, but it's been 4 months, more than 4 months since that attack. The Accountability Review Board was commissioned to determine what happened and what went wrong. Are we to believe that the Accountability Review Board did not look into what was going on at the CIA annex? Because if the CIA annex was involved in trafficking of weapons, then we are much closer to the truth about what really happened. But for Hillary Clinton to say she doesn't know, I find that more likely than not to be perjury. I wouldn't be surprised if she knows the answer to the question. And if the answer to the question was no, I don't see why she wouldn't answer it. If the question is yes and she didn't answer it and knew, then that says cover-up, and it also would say perjury.
Some have said that this issue is bigger than Watergate. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, both Fast and Furious and this issue are bigger than Watergate. Fast and Furious involved executive privilege on the part of the president to prevent a congressionally issued subpoena for documents, and that has dead bodies. That has hundreds of dead bodies. And this as well. I mean, you have documents that, and we don't have the answers as to what was going on at the annex. You have dead bodies. You have a dead ambassador, and that can't be overstated. You had to get back to the video for a second. You had the father of Tyrone Woods tell a talk show host that when Hillary visited Andrews Air Force Base and greeted the 4 bodies that came back from Benghazi, that she told him that they were going to arrest and prosecute the filmmaker. And this is real cover-up stuff. And what was so disappointing, and you and I were talking a little bit about this during the break, is the way the senators and congressmen in both of those committees. There was one congressman, and it was Michael McCall, the new chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. He was on the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House, which is chaired by a Republican, and I think that's important here. And the very last question, he was one of the few I thought that did well, but the very last question that he asked of Hillary was, what was Christopher Stevens doing in Benghazi on 9/11? During the question, the chairman hit the gavel as if to say, your time's up. And instead of telling Hillary, go ahead and answer the question, she looked at him like, you don't require me to answer this question, do you? And he did not require to answer the question. Now, I've seen hearings, and these chairmen have a lot of leeway. If somebody's in the middle of asking a question when the time is up, they let the person that's being asked answer the question. Why? And that was a critically important question, which is why I believe Hillary, look on her face, said, I don't want to answer this. But I don't understand why a Republican chairman, Ed Royce, I don't understand why he wouldn't. I mean, I would expect it from a Democrat. But why would the Republican chairman not allow her or require her to answer that question?
Ben, there's another interesting and rather shocking development this week, and that's when Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta announced that women were going to the front lines in combat. And this came not only as a surprise to the American people, but to the House and Senate as well. No hearings having been conducted, and some have alleged that this was brought out as a diversion to get the media's attention and the public's attention away from Benghazi. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, absolutely. And whether it's Benghazi or Dianne Feinstein's gun grab, the gun bill, this administration, we should know all this stuff. I mean, the Republican leadership should be leading the charge on these kinds of things and pointing this out. But yeah, I have no doubt. And go figure. The media, the mainstream media, you've got to start with the premise on all these things that the mainstream media supports this president. It's been proven time and time and time again. It's not up for debate. Any attempt on their part to portray objectivity is deceit on steroids at this point. And it's the same thing with Walter Cronkite. When people were suspecting him, they were right. We learned that later. This is that on steroids. So whenever you see the mainstream media pushing something like this, it smacks of distraction. Why would they decide to push this and not push the other scandals that were harmful to the president, the Benghazi, the Fast and Furious, the Acorn scandal, any of that stuff? They don't. Whatever the media is pushing when it comes to the administration, you can rest assured that there is a secret motive behind it. And hey, if I'm overly critical and suspicious, he's brought it on himself. The administration has brought suspicion onto itself because the lies just mount up and they continue. But as far as your question, I have no doubt in my mind that it's about a distraction. And, look, one day after Hillary testified, you had another distraction. You had the Dianne Feinstein thing, and you also had John Kerry's confirmation hearing. Yeah. This stuff all gets timed to suit the parties that stand to lose favor.
Well, there are a number of senators and congressmen who believe cover-up is taking place. What happens now with the Benghazi issue?
Oof. Well, I don't know, but it didn't. It may end up dying, unfortunately, unless you get some congressmen and senators that are really going to push it and not let it go away, and Darrell Issa would be a good example of that.
Committee on Oversight. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and they actually started, if you remember, about a month after the attacks in Benghazi. Darrell Issa's committee started, and that's where the bulldogs are. The Trey Gowdies, the Louis Gohmert, Darrell Issa himself, Jason Chaffetz, Raul Labrador. There are some real bulldogs on that committee, and I would love to see somehow they get involved. But I don't know that it will. I mean, look, we had the opportunity served up on a silver platter 2 days ago, and Rand Paul and Senator Johnson and a few others were the only ones that seemed. Even Marco Rubio was a big disappointment. And, that unfortunately, I think we let one get away thanks to these Republican leaders.
Folks, let's open the phone lines. Our telephone number here, 800-733-9829. Your reaction to this, do you believe it should just be swept under the carpet at this point? Our number, 800-733-9829. You're listening to Crosstalk.
The tidal wave of Islam is sweeping across America. But do you know what Muslims believe? VCY America is making available a handy-sized booklet, The Facts on Islam, which spotlights Islam's explosive growth and increasing influence in the world. You'll find this booklet by apologist John Ankerberg and John Weldon a ready reference guide, answering many questions such as how did Islam begin? Who was Muhammad? What does jihad signify? Is Allah like the God of the Bible? What does Islam teach about Jesus Christ? Does the Quran deny the Bible? What basic problems does the Quran present to Muslims? And many other questions. The Facts on Islam booklet is available for a donation of $7 by writing VCY America at 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53208. Or you may make your donation by phone by calling 1-800-729-9829. That's toll-free, 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Our topic today, Benghazi, why it matters. Ben Barrack is with us here today. And taking your phone calls, Ben's with us here just for the quarter hour. And the last portion of the program, we're going to have a mini news roundup of some other important issues that have been going on this week, but wanted to concentrate on this topic because this is very indeed significant to us. We're going to begin in our home city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Fred, go ahead. You're on the air.
I was wondering if anybody noticed Hillary's glasses, that they looked like Mission Impossible glasses, where they could speak to her what to answer and what to say. Never seen her in those type of glasses before in her whole career.
Yeah, well, she did wear them at the inauguration as well.
But that's after the fact, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't believe any coded messages were going there. But thanks. Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
That's an interesting theory I hadn't heard yet.
Let's go to Ron in Mansfield, Pennsylvania. You're on the air.
Well, a great program. I watched Hillary, and I couldn't understand how not one Democrat asked her a hard question. It was a love fest. And when she said to Senator Rand Paul, at this late date, what difference does it make? What would have happened had Nixon said to the Watergate Committee, hey, look, it was only a second-rate burglary. Nobody got hurt, and we didn't take anything worth stealing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would not have held up at that point, would have. But for some reason, Ben, if this just gets swept under the carpet, she'll be successful in that.
As a retired federal agent, I've been in front of grand juries, and when they ask you questions, you answer it. When she was there being grilled or questioned, no one required her, and no one asked a good follow-up question to the lead question. Rand Paul did a wonderful job, and so did that senator from Wisconsin.
Yeah, Ron Johnson. Mm-hmm.
Ron Johnson, yes. And I thought also McCain gave her a tough time when he said, hey, I reject everything you've told us so far.
Yeah. Your comments, Ben, on the questioning itself.
Yeah, I thought the theatrics of McCain, I was watching him. Look, Hillary Clinton and John McCain are good friends. And if you remember, John McCain was probably the most senior Republican to come out in defense of Huma Abedin when she was singled out by Michelle Bachmann. So when I was watching that, I noticed that he was McCain was quite direct and made some charges, but Hillary looked unfazed by it. It was almost as if it was a dog and pony show because there were 2 minutes of John McCain sounding tough with Hillary Clinton and asking a series of questions inside that 2 minutes that never got answered, and Hillary had her 2 minutes afterwards. These senators. And Rand Paul, the other thing that Rand Paul did that none of the others did was he got his first question in after the first 2 minutes and was treating it almost as if it was a cross-examination, asking questions that required a positive or a negative answer. And then, but you've got these other folks. And Rubio it's Rubio and Rand Paul are two of the front runners in 2016, and Rubio hurt himself yesterday with John Kerry and the day before with Hillary because of his style of questioning. With Kerry, he had 10 minutes, and for the first 4.5 minutes, he just rambled on, and Kerry then responded with meandering answer, and that was it. The same thing happened with Hillary. He asked her a question, and she was allowed to meander through the answer. That's not how you do these things. You've got to do it like you're a prosecutor with a cross-examination type questions, like the one Paul asked. What was the CIA annex being used as a hub for weapons trafficking to Turkey? Okay, that's a very specific question, and that was the most glaring thing. But your caller's right about the Democrats. I mean, it's shameful. Barbara Boxer and another one actually started out by praising her for her work on women's rights.
Yeah, and another questioner actually wished her good luck in 2016, kind of a hinted reference to her running for the presidency. Thank you, Ron, for the call. We're going next to James calling from Toma. You're on the air, James.
Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to point out that the damage done here may be a little bit worse than we think. The only viable solution is a difficult one, given the events we're discussing right now. There needs to be a investigation, a impeachment, removal, and prosecution of a wide array of people before a full session of both houses of Congress. This is a collection of widespread, highly conspiratorial acts of treason. And this is very serious and is constitutionally delegated to Congress to define, try, and punish treason.
Interesting. What do you think of that aspect? Is this something that the American people can really be involved on a grassroots in pushing for something like this?
Well, you know, Jim, it's been one of the great frustrations. I mean, the stimulus bill of 2009 and the mortgage crisis and the out-of-control spending gave birth to the Tea Party. And the Tea Party was a phenomenal success. And it put a lot of Republicans in power in the midterms in 2010. But what happened was two things happened. One, and this is just my opinion, but I believe one of them was that people rested on their laurels because we had a bit of a check against this president. The other thing that happened is that the leadership within the Republican Party was told, if you don't do what we're putting you in office to do, then you're done. And I think there was a massive letdown of Republican leadership, and it in some ways deflated the Tea Party. And there was the turnout wasn't there in 2012. So I think what it tells us is that we've got to have leadership that is going to fight. That is what got us motivated in 2010, and it's what demotivated us in 2012. We need that fight back, and we need to push our leaders, our Republican leaders, to do that. And that's the challenge, because once they get pushed successfully, then what your caller just suggested about impeachment, those things would then happen as a matter of consequence.
James, thanks for the call. To Marcia in East Troy, you're on the air.
I just wanted to mention in regard to the media coverage of the investigations or lack thereof, how quick, it seems that people in high places are ready to prosecute those who are doing good and get them out of office or out of their position, such as the Navy chaplain who was kicked out because he refused to not pray in Jesus' name. And the media was all over that, and yet it doesn't seem as though people are really wanting to pursue these things that need to be pursued. They're seeing, good is bad and bad is good, and to me it's just all part of, end-of-time prophecy.
Thank you, Marcia, for raising that. And I guess that underscores again, Ben, the need for people to stay engaged.
Absolutely. It's really, to those of us, and I'm sure the vast majority of the listeners are eyes wide open and are very aware of what's going on, and are half of the frustration is the fact that there's not enough people awake, people that would otherwise be engaged if they just woke up, and that's half the battle. In fact, I think that may be the majority of the battle. If that were to take place, I think you would see a massive change at the top. But until that happens, it's an uphill battle, no doubt.
Bev in Nebraska, you're on the air.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. And like others, yes, I do have a great deal of frustration over these supposed hearings and what has happened. And that question that was asked over and over, what difference does it make now? It just really points up such hypocrisy because the Clintons and Democrats continued to bring up Watergate, like Ben mentioned. They brought that up for 30 or 40 years after it happened, and they kept saying that Nixon was impeached because he lied. Well, these people have lied so continually and so much, and the thing is, no one died in Watergate, but we know that we have these deaths, and also I do have a question, and that is, how can this executive order to seal all of these records about Fast and Furious, and maybe there's even one about this other, but especially not to allow these things to be examined under the Freedom of Information Act, how can this be done when they're simply protecting themselves against, as someone already said, acts of treason possibly?
Ben?
Yeah, to answer the question about Freedom of Information Act request, after Eric Holder was found in contempt of Congress, both criminally and civilly, criminally, there's nothing going to happen with that because it's his subordinate responsible for prosecuting him, and he's already come out and said he's not going to do that. The civil contempt, there was a case filed by the Oversight Committee, Darrell Iss's committee, in that regard. But concurrent with that was a lawsuit from the Judicial Watch, and they are seeking these documents via Freedom of Information Act request too. So you have Judicial Watch, which has done a lot of good work over the years. They've been very effective in many ways. So, but the thing that I don't understand when it comes to this Fast and Furious thing, that smacks of Watergate on steroids. Watergate with murder, in almost every respect, just right down to the use of executive privilege. But what does frustrate me also is the lack of arguments made by the pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment supporters to say, hey, look, you want to talk? Look at Sandy Hook. You're going to exploit Sandy Hook after a month. I mean, you started the same day. And what was Fast and Furious about? It was about this government sending assault weapons intentionally into the hands of cartels who would then use them to kill people. And their assault weapons, they sent 50 calibers down there, AK-47s and 50 calibers.
Tell you what, we need to squeeze one last call in here. Beth in West Dallas, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, my observations regarding the Republicans and the Democrats is that they're just playing good cop, bad cop.
Yep.
It's like the Democrats are the bad cops and the Republicans are the good cops. And you know what? When you look back, any of us who've been around for the whole Clinton ordeal for those 8 years, I mean, this is just traditional Clinton. I mean, everywhere the Clintons goes, there's always a bunch of bodies laying behind them. I mean, Foster, for one. I mean, we really never have really found out all about that either. And for her to say that, what does it matter? Well, you know what? It matters to the parents and the loved ones of these people because they weren't just murdered. They were sodomized. They were tortured. This was an ugly, ugly thing. And for her to throw her hands up and say it doesn't matter, yeah, it does. And let me tell you, on 9/11, when Bush was in office, she just kept coming out and saying, well, what did they know, and when did they know it?
Yeah,
I mean, she just kept this mantra.
Thank you, Beth. I'm out of time. Quick comment here from you, Ben.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious, Jim. The good cop, bad cop is a good analogy. In those hearings, the Democrats loved Hillary, and the Republicans fear her.
Ben Barrack has been our guest here today. Benghazi, Why It Matters. Ben, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome, Jim. Thank you.
And folks, hang on. We'll have several other news stories here right after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Stay with us.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. Perhaps you, like I, have been mocked for trying to warn your family and friends and church members of some of the information that we deal with here at our ministry. Oftentimes, the words of the watchman are not only ignored, but despised. Sadly, many of those who have or will mock you for trying to warn them of false teaching, false teachers, the religious Trojan horse, and the rise of a global false church will finally see that you spoke truth, but perhaps for some of them it will be too late. However, for many, it will be too late only after they've taken part in the evil deeds as described in 2 John 9 through 11. Don't become weary, my friends, in warning people about what's happening within the church today. We're commanded in Acts 20, Romans 16:17, and in Ephesians 5:11 to guard the church and expose false teaching. Be encouraged, for great is your reward.
So often on Fridays, we kind of reserve them for a news roundup, but this Benghazi thing, which broke this week with the hearings going on, felt it was important to really delve into some of these issues. But there's so much more going on this week. Of course, the March for Life going on in Washington, D.C. We had the appeals courts panel here today give the ruling that the Obama recess appointments to the Labor Board are unconstitutional. We have seen the Secretary of Defense that has paved the way to lift the ban on women in combat. They are serving on the front lines, and those issues are going on. But there are several more smaller stories that perhaps you're not going to get from other sources we want to make you aware of, one of which came through FoxNews.com, that the U.S. military has ordered soldiers to remove a cross and a steeple from atop a chapel and to board up cross-shaped windows at a remote American forward operating base in Afghanistan. The removal of the Christian symbols from the chapel at forward operating base came after a soldier complained, leading American atheist President David Silverman to send a letter to the Pentagon. Well, an Army spokesman said that a local command in Afghanistan is aware of this chapel, has taken appropriate action to ensure that it is changed into a neutral facility. The Army spokesman confirmed doors to the chapel were boarded up because of the cross-shaped windows. How can we have the audacity to say, God bless America? Here we have this is onenewsnow.com, a retired military chaplain is concerned about a new Marine training course that begins this week that incorporates Buddhist teachings. Board up the cross, but let's bring Buddhist teachings in. The Associated Press reported Monday that the U.S. Marine Corps is studying how to make its troops even tougher through meditative practices, yoga-style stretching, and exercises based on mindfulness, a Buddhist-inspired concept that emphasizes active attention on the moment to keep the mind in the present. According to the report, the military has been searching for ways to deal with the record suicide rate and thousands of veterans seeking treatment for post-traumatic stress. Marine Corps officials say they will build a curriculum that will integrate these Buddhist techniques if the 8-week experiment at Camp Pendleton yields positive results. No cross, though. Here are WND.com. Chuck Hagel, President Obama's nominee for defense secretary, sits on the board of a fund that is the main financial backer of a group that's urging the U.S. to join the UN's International Criminal Court, which would prosecute American citizens and soldiers for war crimes and other offenses. Our guest today referred to the Kerry hearings. Well, CNSNews.com said Senator John Kerry said if confirmed as the next Secretary of State, he would support making the United States a party to a United Nations convention that's been repeatedly used to advocate for abortions, oppose restrictions, and support government funding across the globe. The treaty is the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW Treaty, signed by Jimmy Carter back in 1980, never ratified by the Senate. During the confirmation hearing yesterday, Barbara Boxer asked, you've been a supporter of CEDAW before, and said, I know it's a tough question. I don't think it should be, but it is. I just want to make sure you continue to support the ratification. Kerry said he would support this and other treaties. Meanwhile, WND reporting that al-Qaeda-linked jihadist rebels are streaming into Syria via the Turkish border at a rate of thousands per month. Officials said Russia and Iran have been compensating for the increased jihadist influx, providing more weapons to Syria, including advanced protections for Syria's missile arsenal. The officials said neither Russia or Syria see an immediate end to the insurgency. Is this going to be the next government that is toppled? New Mexico teenager accused of killing his parents and 3 younger siblings were involved heavily with violent video games prior to the shooting, said the sheriff's office. Nehemiah Grigo, frustrated with his mother, was arrested last Saturday following the deadly shootings at his home in a rural area southwest of Albuquerque. One of the games he mentioned was Modern Warcraft, or make that Modern Warfare. This also, I just wanted to let you know what else is going on. We got this news release from the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. President Barack Obama addressing the nation's largest gathering of gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender rights activists in a special video message. 3,000 lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender advocates assembling today at their 25th National Conference on LGBT Equality, Creating Change. The conference being held in Atlanta is the country's largest gathering of LGBT rights advocates who are strategizing and organizing for the critical year ahead in the area of politics, racial and economic justice, they say, marriage equality, faith, family, and more. Here's the video image, or rather the message that President Obama is sharing with this convention as they convene here right now.
I've always said that the change we need in this country, real change, doesn't come from Washington. It comes from folks like you. Change has always come from ordinary Americans who sit in or stand up or march to demand it. And the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force has been a partner at the forefront of that movement for 40 years. Many of you have dedicated your lives to securing for all Americans the sanctuary of words in our founding creed, that all are created equal, and all must enjoy the same rights and the same protections. Decades ago, in the dark days when most doctors declared being gay a mental disorder, you organized and rallied to change their minds. When thousands suffered in the shadows during the early days of the AIDS epidemic, you cast a bright light on their pain. And today, you're helping lead the way to a future where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, no matter who they love or where they come from, where everyone has access to affordable health care, and where everyone who works hard and plays by the rules has the chance to earn their citizenship. With your help, we will continue the journey to perfect our union. The work will be hard, the road will be long, but I'm more confident than ever that we will reach a better future, as long as Americans like you keep reaching for justice, and all of us keep marching together.
Well, that was Barack Obama delivering remarks by video before the convention. Gay rights advocates are renewing their push for him to sign an executive order banning federal contractors from discriminating against gay employees. The drive comes as the president included an unexpected declaration of support for gay rights in his inaugural address this week, saying our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law, for if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well. Gay supporters hope his comments will lead to action on their agenda on behalf of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. Let me say this, folks, that's all we have seen is action promoting the LGBT lifestyle coming from this administration. Also, to keep in your mind, the British government has published a bill now to legalize same-sex marriage today. Said lawmakers will get their first vote on it in Parliament next month. The bill is likely to become law because it's supported by the Conservative Prime Minister and many members of his cabinet and most Liberal Democrat and Labor lawmakers. The first debate is scheduled for February 5th. It's been a busy week, and what a reminder to be in prayer that this nation turn back to God. But, folks, it begins with you. It begins with me. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.